Hey guys, tonight we're slipping softly back to a world of polished mahogany and flickering lampshades. The Edwardian home after sundown, when lace curtains glowed like honey and the streets outside whispered with horse hooves and rain. You're standing right there, just inside the doorway, boots damp from the cobbles, coat steaming faintly as you step into that golden hush. It's warm here, fragrant with coal smoke and beeswax, the faint rustle of skirts echoing through the hall. You probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes in those corsets and collars, but don't worry. Tonight you get to float unseen, through one of the most secret hours in history. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me where you're listening from, and what time it is where you are. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin in the drawing room where daylight has just surrendered. Outside, the gas lamps bloom one by one, their light filtered through the fog like amber glass. Inside, the household's rhythm changes. The servants move quieter now, their footsteps muffled as they prepare the hearth and lower the lampshades. The air smells faintly of lavender polish and wood smoke. Somewhere down the corridor, a grandfather clock marks the hour with a solemn chime. Evening in an Edwardian home was almost ceremonial. Dinner was done, the heavy clatter of porcelain and silver now replaced by murmured conversation. The family withdrew from the dining room to the drawing room, the ladies first, their gowns trailing across the carpet like whispering waves. They leave behind the gleam of crystal and the men's murmured discussions of politics and trade. Here, in softer light, the house seems to breathe. You can see it now. Lace curtains puffing faintly from the draft, oil lamps reflecting in mirrors, the glow of the fire like an orange heart in the grate. It's easy to imagine you're part of this rhythm, the shift from day's performance to night's retreat. The Edwardians loved balance and display, ornament was everything. Yet when the curtains closed, a gentler world emerged. Women's laughter, unguarded and low, broke through the stiffness of day. They still wore long sleeves and perfect posture, of course, but the mood loosened like a loosened corset string. Evening meant softness, tea trays instead of ledgers, novels instead of newsprint, and conversation that tiptoed between duty and dream. A woman's world then was mostly indoors, and nightfall was both her liberation and her confinement. After the day's visitors, charities, and endless hosting duties, she could finally exhale. The house was her kingdom, but also her cage. Historians still argue whether Edwardian domesticity was a comfort or a quiet imprisonment. Maybe it was both. You can almost feel it, the comfort of the fire and the weight of it too. Across the room, a small spaniel dozes by the rug. A maid enters with the lamp scissors, trimming the wick so the flame burns clear. This little act, so unremarkable, was the pulse of Edwardian evenings, careful maintenance, small perfections, the endless choreography of gentility. You imagine living by light that needed tending, by heat that needed coaxing. Nothing came with a switch. Even your evening peace had to be earned. Somewhere upstairs, in a bedroom you'll visit later, the mistress's toilette table gleams, silver-backed brushes, jars of cold cream, and that faintly medicinal scent of rosewater and beeswax. But for now, you linger in the drawing room, where talk drifts between the mundane and the poetic. They might mention the king's latest garden party or the suffragettes arrested in Hyde Park that morning. Perhaps there's a debate about whether it's proper for women to ride bicycles unchaperoned. Some still say no, for reasons that make you roll your eyes. There's laughter, gentle teasing, and the occasional sigh, because even gossip carries its own etiquette. The fire pops. The maid, moving with soundless grace, replenishes coal. A little ash rises, glowing for a second before disappearing. You realize how alive this house feels, not haunted exactly, but aware. The tick of clocks, the hum of the pipes, the distant murmur from the servants' hall. It's a living organism, every sound and scent deliberate. One mainstream historical fact. By 1905, more than half of middle-class London homes were lit by both gas and electricity. Transition was literally in the air. Some rooms flickered with gas mantles, others glowed with the new electric bulbs. But homeowners distrusted electricity. It was too bright, too modern, too harsh on the complexion. So most women preferred lamplight. Soft, golden, flattering. You can't blame them. Quirky tidbit. Some hostesses believed the exact color of lamplight could influence conversation. Amber light encouraged intimacy. Bluish light made people argumentative. There were even conversation lamps, with tinted shades designed for dinner parties. Victorian pseudoscience meets early mood lighting. A low murmur draws your attention, a conversation near the mantel. A younger woman, newly married, is describing her honeymoon in Devon, her cheeks pink with the memory. The older women nod, half smiling. You catch one glance between them, indulgent, slightly amused. They've all played that part before, the bride, the promise, the polite fiction that marriage is pure romance. Later, when the husbands retreat to smoke cigars, the truth will come out in sighs and jokes whispered over teacups. For now, the house glows with contentment. Even the furniture seems drowsy, mahogany gleaming in the lamplight, velvet drapes holding the scent of the day. You move toward the window, peek between lace folds, and glimpse the street outside. It's raining lightly, and under the lamplight the drops look like falling gold. A man hurries by, hat tilted, collar up. Somewhere down the row, a carriage door slams. The world beyond feels distant, almost imaginary. Inside, the fire hums. The clock chimes again, 9 o'clock. That means bedtime preparations will soon begin upstairs, but not yet. Down here, the drawing room lingers in its lull. You notice something else, the small domestic details that never make it into grand histories. The smell of toast faint from the kitchen because the cook sneaks a slice before bed. The faint scratch of a cat at the scullery door. The sound of slippers padding across polished floors. Life made of murmurs. Historians still argue whether the Edwardian era was truly peaceful or just holding its breath before catastrophe. You know what's coming. The war that will take away sons, servants, and certainty. But tonight, in 1908 or thereabouts, nobody knows. The peace feels endless. You feel the illusion of safety, the warm pulse of a world that thinks itself eternal. You imagine sitting down in one of those deep armchairs, a cup of tea warming your palms. A woman nearby leafs through the Ladies' Realm magazine, filled with fashion plates and domestic advice. There's an article titled, "How to Keep a Husband Interested in." You snort quietly, because the suggestion involves quoting Tennyson and never contradicting him. Another laugh rises across the room. Someone mentions the king's new photograph looking rather tired. Someone else hums the opening of a song from the music hall, then stops, embarrassed. It's not entirely proper here. Yet beneath all the manners and small courtesies, there's a kind of intimacy. This is their hour after the performance of day, before the duties of night. You tilt your head. The firelight ripples across the ceiling, turning shadows into lace. The house seems to float in its own amber bubble, and just as your eyelids start to feel heavy, a draft slips under the door, carrying the faint scent of rain. Somewhere upstairs, someone laughs, a bright, unguarded sound. It's gone almost immediately, swallowed by the thick hush of the home. The night is only beginning. The laughter upstairs fades into the gentle thrum of the house settling. You make your way up the carpeted stairs, each step muffled by the runner, and pause where the scent changes, from fire and polish below to lavender water and starch above. The air feels more private here, closer to the pulse of the women who live behind these carved doors. You stop before a half-open doorway. Inside, the lamplight spills soft and golden over a dressing screen, lace sleeves draped neatly across its top. The room smells faintly of talcum and faint candle smoke. You watch as she exhales, a long, tired breath, and unhooks the first clasp of her corset. There's a sound to it, a sigh of fabric, a whisper of freedom. The day's armor loosens, stays unlaced, silk skirts puddle on the carpet like melted candlelight. Her maid helps with quiet, practiced hands, fingers nimble from years of repetition. The mistress keeps her gaze on the mirror, not out of vanity but habit, checking posture, symmetry, the performance of composure even when no one's watching. This is the moment when women reclaim themselves, however briefly. The evening ritual of loosening corsets, brushing hair, and setting aside the constraints of fashion wasn't just comfort, it was survival. One historian called it the only hour of truth in an Edwardian woman's day. You can almost hear the bones of the corset creak as they're laid aside. Beneath the silk and whalebone, faint red marks stripe her skin. You wince a little. The Edwardians treated discomfort as a virtue. Endurance was elegance. But even the most proper ladies secretly rejoiced in the nightly unfastening, in that first full breath after 12 hours of controlled poise. The maid, Annie, folds the corset neatly, smoothing the satin edges. She's young, maybe 19, her uniform immaculate but her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. For her, the ritual is work, not relief. She stands close enough to smell the faint rose perfume clinging to her mistress's skin, close enough to know every freckle and scar. Yet she remains invisible, a ghost in service. The mistress, now wrapped in a soft muslin dressing gown, sits before her mirror. "That will be all, Annie," she says kindly, not unfeeling but practiced in command. The door closes with a quiet snick and the room exhales again. You move closer. The mirror glows with reflected lamplight. On the table, a silver brush, a porcelain bowl of water, a folded towel embroidered with her initials. She begins to undo her hair, the pins clicking softly into a dish. Long strands fall loose, shimmering like dark honey. It's oddly intimate, this moment of undoing. For all the day's restraint, the night belongs to the slow reclamation of body and breath. You imagine the ache in her shoulders, the relief in every sigh. She brushes her hair 100 times as fashion magazines recommended, not superstition but a beauty prescription. Gloss and grace, the Queen magazine called it. The repetition is hypnotic, each stroke catching the light, the soft crackle of static in the air. Mainstream historical fact. Corsets weren't always as torturous as popular myth claims, but they were restrictive. By 1900, new health corsets appeared, designed to shift pressure from the waist to the hips. Still, women fainted often, not because of weakness, but because shallow breathing was literally built into their wardrobes. Quirky tidbit. Some inventive souls created ventilated corsets with hidden metal vents meant to let air circulate under the fabric. They were advertised as the hygienic way to maintain allure. You laugh softly, romance by air hole. Outside, the rain continues. It taps the window pane like a polite visitor. Inside, she finishes brushing and begins to cleanse her face. Cold cream spread in slow circles, white against her skin. The scent is unmistakable: rosewater, beeswax, and almond oil. It was a daily ritual, a battle against London soot and candle smoke. You wonder what she thinks about while she works. Maybe she recalls a conversation from dinner, a comment that stung but couldn't be answered. Maybe she thinks of her children asleep in the nursery, or the friend who married for love and vanished into scandal. Or maybe she thinks of nothing at all, letting the rhythm of her routine quiet her mind. Historians still argue whether Edwardian women truly believed in the virtues of modesty or were simply trapped by them. Some diaries suggest quiet rebellion, a loosened bodice here, a daring hat there. Others record only contentment, pride in being proper. The truth, as usual, probably lies somewhere in between. She finishes her toilette, dabbing her face dry, and sets her creams aside. The mirror reflects not a society hostess or a wife now, but a person stripped of artifice. For the first time all day, she's not performing. You catch her expression. It's small, almost private. Relief, fatigue, and a faint curiosity at the stranger in her reflection. Then the moment fades. She straightens, reties the ribbon of her gown, and crosses the room to draw the curtains. The movement is graceful, automatic. Even solitude is performed elegantly here. You glance around the room. The furnishings are plush but not extravagant: rosewood furniture, pale wallpaper, a vase of wilting chrysanthemums. There's a small bookshelf by the window, The Home Chat, Punch, and a few slim novels by Mrs. Humphrey Ward. A clock ticks on the mantel. Every surface gleams faintly in the low light. She picks up a hand mirror, turns it slightly, and studies her profile, the practiced tilt of chin, the angle of her hairline. You suspect she's not admiring herself so much as inspecting for cracks. A woman of her station must remain flawless, even in private. The world demanded it. Downstairs, faint piano notes drift upward. Perhaps her daughter is practicing, or perhaps it's a record playing on the new gramophone, another symbol of modernity creeping into Edwardian rooms. You think about how that sound connects every part of the house, invisible but unifying. She sits again, this time not before the mirror but before a small embroidery frame, half finished with pale green silk. A vine pattern curls across it, delicate as a sigh. She works a few careful stitches, her needle flashing in and out of the fabric. This is how she unwinds, quiet creation, no purpose but beauty. It's soothing to watch. The world outside may be roaring with change, motor cars, women marching for the vote, whispers of political upheaval, but inside this lace-curtained room, time moves like syrup. Each stitch seems to say, for now nothing changes. And yet even here, rebellion hums beneath the surface. Some women began loosening their stays for good around this time, experimenting with the new Liberty bodices. They claimed freedom of movement, scandalizing traditionalists. In private diaries, you read the tone, mischievous pride. "I walked 2 blocks unshaped," one woman wrote, "and did not die." You smile. The quiet bravery of small acts, slipping off a corset, brushing one's hair a little too long, thinking one's own thoughts by lamplight. History rarely records them, but they shape the mood of the age more than royal decrees ever could. You lean against the wall, eyes heavy now, watching her movements slow. The fire in the grate burns low, shadows deepening. She stifles a yawn, smoothing her gown, and reaches for her novel. You glimpse the title, The Shuttle by Frances Hodgson Burnett, a story of women and transatlantic reinvention. Maybe that's why she reads it. Maybe she's dreaming of a world wider than this room. Outside, the rain softens into mist. The clock chimes again. She closes her book, sets it aside, and leans back in her chair. For a moment, she doesn't move. You can almost hear her thoughts, though she'll never speak them aloud. The house holds its breath. The corset lies folded on the dresser like a discarded shell. The woman, bare of its grip, seems both smaller and more real. You realize you're seeing something precious, not scandalous or shocking, but human. The quiet reclamation of self, hidden behind lace and lamp glow. The house has gone still again, so quiet that even the coals in the grate seem to breathe more softly. You're back in that upstairs room, the one where lamplight pools like melted gold and the faint smell of rosewater clings to the air. On the dressing table before her, the mirror waits, oval, heavy, framed in gilt. It reflects not only her face, but the small world around her. The flicker of the lamp, the flutter of curtain lace, the steady tick of time. She sits before it like someone visiting herself. The mirror is both a friend and a judge. It's seen every mask she wears, the social smile, the polite interest, the carefully contained emotion, and now in the hush of evening it watches her drop them one by one. Her eyes are tired. Her lips, freed from their practiced curve, soften into something closer to truth. You notice how the lamplight rounds her features, how it makes her look younger and sadder all at once. She lifts a small brush, silver handle, boar bristles, and begins to sweep loose powder across her face. Not for others this time, for herself. To cool the skin, to soothe the day's strain. Complexion powder with pearl essence, the label reads. It catches the light faintly, shimmering like frost. You think vanity, maybe, but here at this hour it's something gentler, almost ritualistic. Self-care before the word existed, a daily restoration. Mainstream historical fact. Edwardian women's dressing tables were mini apothecaries. Cold creams, powders, tonics, and perfumes lined up like soldiers of self-maintenance. Brands like Pond's, Pear's, and Vinolia became household staples. Advertisements promised complexions of milk and velvet, but beneath the slogans lay a deeper truth. Women were learning, quietly, to care for themselves on their own terms. She studies her reflection, tilts her head, dabs perfume at her wrists, violet water from a cut glass bottle. The scent rises, faint but distinct. It smells of tenderness mixed with longing, like pressed flowers in an old letter. She closes her eyes and inhales. You can tell she's not thinking of anyone in particular, just remembering what it feels like to be wholly present, fragrant and alive. There's a letter half hidden under a powder tin, creased, opened too many times. You shouldn't read it, but your gaze lingers anyway. A man's handwriting, elegant, a little dramatic. Your laughter stays with me still. No signature, just initials. It's probably innocent, or maybe not. Edwardian correspondence was full of codes, half-phrases, plausible deniability. Everyone knew how to flirt without confessing it. She folds it again, slowly, slides it back into its drawer. Historians still argue whether Edwardian marriages were affectionate partnerships or polite performances. The truth varied wildly. Some couples were genuine friends. Others were strangers sharing a roof and a surname. Women like her, educated, observant, quietly intelligent, learned to navigate the spaces between affection and duty. They found privacy not in solitude, but in small, daily acts of self-definition. She takes up her brush again, running it through her loosened hair. The mirror catches the motion, the rhythmic, almost hypnotic sweep, strands glimmering in the light. The soft rasp of the bristles is the only sound. You glance at the other objects scattered around the mirror. A pair of pearl earrings, a sewing thimble, a small cameo brooch carved with a woman's profile. There's something poetic in that, the image of a woman staring at another woman trapped in ivory. You think of the countless hours women must have spent like this, facing their reflections, considering not only what they looked like but who they were allowed to be. The Edwardian ideal demanded composure. Pale skin, smooth hair, quiet voice. Emotions were permitted only in moderation. Even grief had its etiquette. But behind every mirror, another story simmered. She picks up a glass atomizer, squeezes the bulb. A fine mist sparkles briefly in the air, then settles onto her neck. The fragrance changes the mood of the room entirely. It's no longer domestic, it's dreamlike. Quirky tidbit: Edwardian women often matched their perfume to the flowers in their sitting rooms. Violet and heliotrope were considered respectable, musk or jasmine a little daring. Some ladies even applied perfume to their letters, believing the scent would make the recipient's heart race. Spoiler: it often did. She leans closer to the mirror now, inspecting her face. There's no smile, no audience, just scrutiny. You sense the quiet ache of expectation, how the world measures her worth in the reflection's perfection. But you also see the glimmer of defiance in her eyes, as if she's thinking, this face is mine, whether they like it or not. From the hallway, faint voices drift, her daughter giggling with the governess, the maid whispering to another below the stairs. Life hums softly around her, but this moment is hers alone. You find yourself wondering what she'd say if you could ask her what she sees in the mirror. Would she talk about beauty? Or about time? How it slips, how she watches it move across her features year by year. Maybe she'd laugh, the way Edwardian women often did when things grew too intimate. A small, graceful deflection. She opens a drawer, takes out a velvet pouch. Inside, a string of pearls gleams faintly. Not for evening wear tonight, just to hold, to remember. They were her mother. You can see how she runs her fingers over them, counting each bead like a prayer. In this era of constant propriety, touch is one of the few private luxuries left. Outside, the rain has stopped. A pale moon presses against the window pane, silvering the edges of everything. The mirror, her gown, the faint mist of perfume still lingering in the air. The lamp flame dips, then steadies. For a moment, she looks at herself differently, not as someone rehearsing womanhood, but as a creature of light and shadow, of quiet agency. The kind of awareness that can't be entirely contained by etiquette manuals or marriage vows. Historians sometimes dismiss these rituals as vanity, but you can see now they were something else. Self-recognition in an age that gave women few mirrors of their own beyond glass. She reaches for a small bottle labeled nerve tonic. You raise an eyebrow. Ah, the era's favorite cure for everything from female hysteria to fatigue of thought. A mild mixture of herbs and alcohol, it was basically a polite way of taking a shot before bed. She pours a spoonful, sips, winces slightly, then smiles to herself. The modern equivalent of melatonin tea. The mirror catches that faint smile, multiplies it. For a second she looks radiant, not the painted glow of artifice, but something softer, more human. You realize that this room, with its perfumes and powders, is less a shrine to beauty than a sanctuary of survival. Every jar and brush is a weapon against erasure, a quiet claim to personhood. As the lamp burns lower, she sets everything back in its precise place, the choreography of order, the illusion of control. The house outside remains silent, but something within her seems to settle. The world beyond her window might still belong to men, to politics, to the noisy engines of progress, but this little kingdom of glass and scent is entirely her own. She glances once more into the mirror, then reaches forward and turns down the wick. The reflection flickers, dissolving into shadow. The last thing you see is her silhouette against the curtained light, hair loose, shoulders bare, head slightly tilted, as if she's listening for something beyond the ticking clock. Maybe she's listening to herself. Downstairs, the fire has burned low, and the house hums with its late evening stillness, the hush that comes just before sleep but isn't quite rest. You drift through the hallways, candlelight trembling along wallpaper and gilt frames, until you reach a smaller room at the back of the house. The air here smells faintly of ink and lilacs. A desk stands by the window, and beside it, a stack of folded letters tied with a pale ribbon. She's there again, seated in a cushioned chair, a robe drawn close around her shoulders. A small blotter sits before her, an inkwell glinting under lamplight. The pen scratches softly as she writes, the sound steady and meditative, the rhythm of thought becoming shape. The house may sleep, but the night is her hour of correspondence. Letter writing for Edwardian women was both duty and escape. Hundreds of notes traveled daily from homes like this one. Thank yous, condolences, invitations, secrets. The postal service was efficient enough that you could write to a friend in the morning and receive a reply by evening. Lives unfolded on paper. Whole emotional worlds existed between stamps and signatures. She pauses, twirls the pen, and glances toward a vase on the desk. Inside it, a few lilac blooms lean tiredly against the glass. Their scent drifts faintly through the room, sweet and slightly melancholy, like nostalgia made tangible. She dips the nib again and continues writing, her hand elegant but firm. The letter is to her sister in Bath. You catch fragments as she murmurs them aloud while writing. Mother's cough worsened. Gerald has taken a fancy to motoring, though I cannot see the appeal. The roses in the garden look better than I feel. Her tone is polite, restrained, as all correspondence must be. Feelings exist only in hints, tucked between the lines like pressed flowers. But her eyes, soft with fatigue, betray more than she writes. You can tell she's lonely, not dramatically, not tragically, just quietly, like many women of her station were. Historians still argue whether letter writing served as emotional liberation or just another form of social labor. Some claim it was women's literature in miniature, an art form smuggled into daily life. Others say it kept women confined to the smallness of domestic exchange. Perhaps both are true. She finishes the first page, sprinkles it with blotting sand, and lifts it delicately to the lamplight. The ink gleams wetly before settling into permanence. There's something sacred about that, how each stroke of the pen fixes a moment forever. You glance at the other letters tied with ribbon, some addressed to cousins, others to women's clubs, one to a Mrs. L. Montague, Bloomsbury. You suspect that one contains the livelier correspondence, the kind written in sly, conspiratorial tone. Friendships between women in this era were lifelines. Beneath the formal greetings, real affection pulsed. Quirky tidbit, many Edwardian women owned letter perfumes, tiny vials designed to scent the paper before sealing. Lavender for friendship, rose for love, verbena for wit. Some even pressed petals inside envelopes as a code of feeling. A lilac petal meant, "I miss you but dare not say it." She, of course, uses lilac ink. You watch her fold the pages, seal them with wax, and press a small stamp ring into the still warm surface. Her initials intertwine in crimson, a personal signature beyond her husband's name. It's a quiet declaration of self. I exist and I write. The rain has returned, whispering against the panes. She looks up for a moment, listening, her expression soft. Then she turns to a second sheet of paper, this one smaller, thinner, the kind used for private notes. You sense a shift in her demeanor. The careful posture loosens, the pen hesitates, then begins to move with more fluidity. The handwriting changes, faster, more impulsive. You lean closer. This letter isn't to a sister or friend. It begins simply, "I dreamed again of the garden." She writes in fragments, phrases like sighs. You would have laughed at the rain. The world felt too alive for words. I think of it whenever the scent of lilac returns. It's not scandalous, not even improper, just intimate. The kind of message that breathes instead of speaks. The ink pools slightly where her hand trembles, and you realize she's not writing for anyone else now. She's writing for herself. There's a certain ache to these nocturnal confessions. The Edwardian world gave women so few outlets for emotional candor that paper became confidant and witness. Diaries were risky. Maids might read them. But letters, even unsent, offered a sanctioned space for longing. She stops mid-sentence, sighs, and sits back. The pen wobbles slightly in its holder. Her gaze drifts toward the window again, where raindrops streak the glass like tiny rivers. Beyond them, the world blurs into darkness. It's late now. The rest of the house sleeps. The lamps downstairs are out, the fire reduced to embers. She's alone with ink, lilac scent, and her thoughts. A cat pads silently into the room, curls by her feet. She reaches down absently to stroke its fur, her fingertips moving in time with the rain. You realize this. These simple sensory rituals were how women stitched meaning into confinement. Each gesture, writing, scenting, petting, listening, was a small rebellion against silence. She folds the second letter too, though she doesn't seal it. Instead, she slips it into a drawer where several similar envelopes already rest. Letters never sent, feelings never spoken. Together, they form a hidden diary, a record of the inner life no etiquette book would ever acknowledge. Historians still debate whether women of the Edwardian age were truly silenced or whether they cultivated a subtler coded language of their own. But sitting here, watching her write by lamplight, you can feel the truth humming between the lines. Silence wasn't emptiness, it was strategy. The pen rests at last. She leans back, eyes half closed, mouth curved into something like peace. The lilac blooms on the desk nod gently in the draft, their scent deepening as the night air cools. You can almost feel the weight of that stillness, the satisfaction of having given form to the formless, of having spoken even when no one will hear. She rises, ties her robe tighter, and blows gently across the inked surface before closing the blotter. The candle gutters low. The mirror across the room reflects her faintly, haloed by gold and shadow. Before leaving, she pauses at the door, looks back at the desk. Then, almost tenderly, she reaches to pinch off one wilting lilac bloom, tucks it between the pages of an unfinished letter, and smiles. A small, secret smile meant only for the darkness. You follow her into the corridor. The clock downstairs strikes midnight. The house sighs. Somewhere in another room, a floorboard creaks like the house itself is dreaming. The letters wait in their drawer, perfumed and patient, whispering with the faint rustle of paper, a chorus of unsent thoughts, fragile but eternal. Morning drifts softly through gauze curtains, the pale gray light that belongs to rain-soaked English days. The fire downstairs has been coaxed back to life, and the smell of toast and coal mingles faintly in the air. You find yourself once again in the rhythm of the household, the sound of boots on flagstones, the hiss of the kettle, the rustle of linen skirts. The lady of the house is awake early today. She moves quietly through her dressing room, the sort of space that was both sanctuary and stage, half private retreat, half display of ritual. A cheval mirror leans near the window, its frame carved in swirls of ivy and gilt. On the dressing table, a silver-backed brush, a row of crystal jars with ivory lids, and a shallow bowl of rosewater glinting in the morning dim. You can almost hear the soft clink of glass as she lifts the lid of one jar, a pale cream inside, scented with almond and beeswax. It's cold against her fingertips, and she warms it between her palms before smoothing it over her face. This is her morning ritual, practiced with the same quiet devotion as prayer. Edwardian self-care, though rarely called that, was an art form wrapped in propriety. Manuals of the era advised women to tend to the complexion, the figure, and the disposition, as if these were the three sacred pillars of feminine virtue. The language was moral rather than medical. A healthy complexion reflected a healthy conscience, a graceful bearing, a disciplined mind. She dips a cloth into the rosewater, presses it lightly to her temples, and inhales. The fragrance is gentle roses and rain. There were countless concoctions for the Edwardian woman's toilette: cold creams made from spermaceti and lanolin, glycerine lotions, violet powders, even homemade tonics of cucumber and milk. The wealthy could purchase creams from London perfumeries like Yardley or Penhaligon. Others relied on kitchen remedies, passed down in notebooks written in looping cursive. A maid enters quietly carrying a small tray, a soft-boiled egg, toast triangles, and a pot of tea. The tray rests beside a slender vase of garden flowers, today pansies and ferns. The lady nods her thanks but does not speak. Mornings were often like this, serene, deliberate, wrapped in the ritual of preparation. You notice, too, how these acts of care are interwoven with restraint. Corsets wait beside the dressing screen, narrow-waisted, bone-stitched, and formidable. To the modern eye, they seem instruments of confinement, yet many Edwardian women saw them as armor, the necessary structure that allowed poise. She draws a breath, steps behind the screen, and the maid begins lacing. The motion is practiced: pull, pause, tie, smooth. As the laces tighten, her figure transforms, not painfully but precisely. The long Edwardian line emerges, that signature silhouette like a lily stem: high bust, narrow waist, smooth hips. Beneath her breath, she murmurs something, perhaps a fragment of a song. The corset is both discipline and identity. Once dressed, she sits again before the mirror. A row of hatpins glitters beside her, each tipped with pearl or enamel. Her hair, thick, chestnut, and slightly unruly, is brushed 100 strokes before being coiled into shape. The Edwardian pompadour isn't easy to achieve. It requires patience, padding, and more than a little artistry. The maid works silently, fingers deft. Outside, the sky has deepened from gray to silver. The light catches the glass perfume bottle on the table. She picks it up, a slender cut crystal vial filled with a golden liquid. The scent, when she lifts it to her wrist, is subtle yet unmistakable: orange blossom, iris, sandalwood. Perfume was another language of self, one that said what women could not. A touch behind the ears, at the throat, along the inside of the wrist. The gesture is as graceful as it is habitual. You sense that in this act, scent, reflection, ritual, there lies something private, something almost sacred. Historians often speak of the Edwardian period as a time of contradictions: elegance on the surface, strain beneath. The women of this world balanced beauty with repression, expectation with quiet resistance. Self-care, for them, was not indulgence but endurance, a daily reclaiming of dignity within narrow confines. She sits a moment longer, gazing into the mirror. Her eyes are calm but thoughtful, as though the reflection is not entirely her own. You realize the mirror itself holds stories. It has watched her grow from bride to mother, from romantic to realist. Every brushstroke, every dab of cream, every sigh before a social engagement has been witnessed here in silent partnership. A carriage clatters outside and the moment breaks. She rises, adjusts her sleeves, and pins a cameo at her throat, a small oval depicting a woman's profile, serene and composed. The cameo is ivory, the frame gold. You suspect it was a wedding gift. Before leaving the room, she glances once more at the dressing table. Everything is in its place: brushes, creams, powders, the faint shimmer of rosewater. To an observer, it's a tableau of refinement. To her, it's something else, a space of quiet autonomy in a world where few such spaces exist. You linger behind as she leaves. The air still hums faintly with fragrance and warmth. Outside the window, a gardener passes with a wheelbarrow of damp soil and tulip bulbs. The cycle of care continues: body, garden, house, all tended, all temporary. The maid returns to tidy. She wipes the marble surface, replaces the perfume bottle, folds a lace handkerchief. The faint traces of the morning's ritual vanish as if erased. But if you close your eyes, you can still sense it. The soft brush on hair, the scent of rose and sandalwood, the gentle precision of a life lived within the boundaries of grace. You step away from the dressing room and down the corridor. From a nearby room comes the sound of a pianola, mechanical yet wistful, playing a waltz that once filled London's ballrooms. The melody follows you as you move through the house, echoing faintly off the plaster walls. Each note feels like an echo of her morning ritual, controlled, beautiful, slightly melancholic. Somewhere downstairs, the lady is preparing to greet the day, to host guests, to perform once again the intricate dance of Edwardian womanhood. But up here, in the quiet dressing room, her reflection lingers in the mirror, calm, composed, and waiting. Because that is what self-care truly was in this world of lace and constraint. Not luxury, but waiting. Waiting for the moment one could finally breathe, freely and without witness. Evening drifts gently down, that slow golden hour when the house hums low with the sound of ticking clocks, whispering skirts, and the faint clatter of china being cleared from supper. You follow the light as it softens, sliding along the wainscoting, pooling against the lace of a table runner, touching the embroidery hoop stacked neatly by a velvet chair. It's here in this small domestic hush that the rhythm changes. The day's formalities fade and the private art of women begins again. The needles whisper, the conversation that hums like a secret song. A lamp has been lit, its shade trimmed with silk fringe the color of champagne. Beneath it sits the lady of the house, a soft wool shawl drawn across her shoulders. In her lap rests a square of linen stretched tight in an embroidery hoop. A pattern has already been drawn faintly upon it, roses winding around a monogram, destined perhaps for a pillowcase or a christening cloth. The needle dips and rises, silver flashing in lamplight. Thread slips through her fingers like silk rain, 1, 2, 3 stitches. The rhythm is soothing, almost hypnotic. You find yourself lulled by it, the way one might be by the sound of the sea. Needlework in the Edwardian home was more than pastime. It was performance. Women were taught that industrious hands were virtuous hands. A lady who embroidered, even for pleasure, projected calm purpose, an antidote to idleness, that moral hazard of the leisured class. Still, not all stitches were for show. There were quiet acts of rebellion woven into these patterns, hidden initials, or secret motifs only the maker knew. Some women stitched lines from poems, initials of forbidden names, or tiny symbols of suffragist pride, like the violet and green flowers of the Women's Social and Political Union. Historians still argue whether embroidery served to confine or to liberate women. Was it a gilded cage, keeping hands busy while voices were silenced? Or was it, in its meditative repetition, a space of genuine reflection, a place where thought could wander free? You glance around the room and notice you're not alone. A few others have gathered, a sister, a friend, perhaps a daughter, each with her own hoop or thread basket. Their soft conversation, punctuated by the quiet rip of thread pulled taut. Someone speaks of the new suffrage meetings in London, another of her cousin's engagement party. Someone laughs quietly about the latest scandal in the Tatler. There's something intimate about the way women talk while their hands are busy. Words come easier when the eyes are downcast, when attention appears elsewhere. The embroidery circle becomes confessional. A maid enters briefly to refill the teapot. The air smells of bergamot and wool and beeswax polish. You catch a glimpse of the maid's own mending basket, a jumble of plain cloth, practical stitches, a life lived in parallel but never equal. When she leaves, the silence returns, soft but companionable. You watch as the lady selects her colors: pale rose, leaf green, ivory, gold. The threads glimmer like spun sunlight. Each skein is wound around a tiny card labeled Liberty & Co., one of London's fashionable purveyors of fine materials. To embroider with Liberty thread was a small badge of taste, much as wearing one of their gauzy tea gowns would be. There's artistry here. The embroidery hoop is her canvas, the parlor her studio, yet she would never claim the word artist. That title was reserved for men with oils and easels. Still, every flower she stitches, every measured loop of gold or green, is a quiet assertion of beauty, patience, and self. A clock chimes the half hour. The fire pops gently. She pauses to sip her tea, and the needle glints midair like a frozen star. You realize the act of sewing isn't just about creation, it's about rhythm. The Edwardian day was a series of measured moments, a choreography of domestic grace. The kettle's whistle, the turning of pages, the whisper of thread through linen. This was how women found their pace in a world that offered little freedom of motion. Sometimes, when no one was looking, the needle changed purpose. The same hands that stitched roses for a tablecloth might repair a torn cuff, hide a tear in a child's dress, or even stitch secret pockets into skirts, tiny rebellions against restriction. One woman nearby is working on a sampler, the kind girls were once required to make to prove skill and discipline. But her letters, when you lean closer, are different. The alphabet is interrupted by a phrase, small, discreet, yet clear enough. To be still is not to sleep. A motto, perhaps, or a quiet protest. The lady of the house smiles faintly as she notices your glance. She doesn't explain. She simply returns to her work, needle dipping again, her shawl slipping down one shoulder. In that moment, you understand something subtle. These evenings of lace and embroidery, of tea and whispered laughter, were not only about beauty but about endurance. Each stitch was an assertion of presence in a world that often treated women as decoration. A sudden draft flutters the lamp fringe. The flames in the hearth bow and straighten. A few embers drift upward, glowing like tiny constellations. For a moment, the room looks almost sacred, a chapel of domestic ritual. The conversation turns to love stories. Someone recalls a friend who married for wealth and regretted it. Another speaks shyly of an engagement yet unannounced. There is a round of sighs, the kind that are half wistful, half weary. In Edwardian parlors, such talk was both rebellion and release. Marriage was not merely romance. It was economics, politics, survival. So women spoke around it, never quite of it, sowing roses while quietly measuring the thorns. The evening stretches on. Lamps burn lower. One by one, the stitches slow, hands rest. The air hums with the scent of tea leaves and warm linen. You can feel the shared fatigue, the gentle ache in shoulders and wrists. Before bed, the lady gathers her work and folds it neatly into a drawer scented with lavender. The unfinished embroidery will wait for her, patient as a secret. Tomorrow, she will add more roses, perhaps a vine, perhaps a hidden word. As she stands, the firelight catches her face, a profile half in shadow, half in glow. The quiet pride there is unmistakable. For all the limits placed upon her, she has created something beautiful with her own hands, something that, though small, is wholly hers. You turn toward the window. Outside, the rain has stopped. The glass is misted, and beyond it the garden gleams faintly under gaslight, wet leaves, glistening cobblestones, the world hushed in amber stillness. In this soft pause between the day's duty and the night's dreams, you understand what the needle's whisper truly means. It's not submission, but survival. The steady pulse of creation in a world that tried to keep women still. The lamp flickers once, twice. Then darkness settles, as quiet as thread through cloth. The next evening arrives dressed in quiet anticipation, an air of waiting that seems to hum through the hallways like the low note of a cello. The household has finished dinner. The scent of roast and lavender polish lingers faintly. The men have withdrawn to the smoking room, their laughter muffled by oak doors. And you follow the faint sound of melody winding its way down the corridor like a ribbon of perfume. It leads to the parlor, the sanctuary of after-hours softness, where women reclaim their small stage. Inside, the air feels golden, suspended between lamplight and shadow. A few chairs are drawn close to the piano, and someone, perhaps the eldest daughter, perhaps the hostess herself, sits poised upon the stool, fingers hovering above ivory keys polished to a moonlit sheen. She begins to play. A waltz at first, lilting and nostalgic, the kind of tune you can almost see rather than hear, skirts turning in candlelight, chandeliers glinting. The melody swells gently, unfurling into the air like silk. You can feel the vibration of each note through the floorboards, through your pulse. This is what the Edwardians called parlor music. It was a staple of domestic evenings, a mix of sentiment and skill meant to charm guests and soothe nerves. The upright piano stood in nearly every middle and upper-class home, as essential as the hearth or the tea service. Lessons began in childhood. To play gracefully was as important as to speak well or to walk with poise. But here, in the hush of a woman's evening, it feels different. This is not performance, it's release. The lady plays not for applause but for herself, her fingers finding emotion the era did not permit her to voice. Historians still argue whether the Edwardian woman's parlor was a true space of creativity or merely a gilded cage for genteel accomplishment. Was she expressing herself, or only rehearsing her role within the fragile choreography of propriety? You can decide that for yourself, but tonight, it sounds like freedom. The piece changes, now a Chopin nocturne, something introspective and faintly sorrowful. The notes tumble like raindrops on velvet, echoing against the glass of the framed photographs nearby. You notice them, sepia portraits of ancestors, solemn in their finery. Their eyes, unblinking, seem to watch as though this music is both memory and inheritance. Across the room, a young woman hums softly along. Another, reclining on the fainting couch, turns the pages of the lady's pictorial, occasionally glancing up to smile. The faint rustle of the magazine blends with the piano's rhythm, a duet of paper and sound. You might be tempted to think this was a dull, mannered existence, but look closer. Every gesture here is charged with quiet emotion. The tapping foot of the woman sewing near the fire, keeping time to the melody. The pianist's slight smile when a chord lands just right. The way one lady's gaze lingers on the flame's reflection in the polished brass candle holder, as though she's thinking of something or someone far away. There's a small crystal decanter on the mantel, sherry or Madeira, poured into delicate cut glasses. The soft clink punctuates the music. Someone proposes a sing-along, and a maid, unofficial accompanist of 100 evenings, fetches a stack of sheet music tied with a ribbon. Songs follow one another like memories. Daisy Bell, In the Shade of the Old Apple Tree, a sentimental ballad or two. Voices overlap, shy at first, then warm and human. Even the older aunt with the lace collar joins in on the refrain, her voice cracking but sincere. You might smile at the quaintness of it all, but listen a little longer and you'll hear the pulse beneath, the ache for something beyond the drawing room. For many women, this hour of song was the one time they could speak of love, longing, and loss in public disguise. When the music slows again, conversation blooms softly in its place. One woman mentions that she's been reading about the new music, Debussy, daring and strange. Another admits she prefers Sullivan's melodies, something that tells a proper story. Someone else laughs. Music that sounds like fog. The piano lid is closed with a soft click. A different rhythm takes over, that of the gramophone. A newer invention, finicky and magical, its horn gleaming like a golden trumpet. The lady of the house winds it with care, sets the needle, and places a record, Caruso, perhaps, or one of those early sentimental recordings that turn slightly warbled with time. The crackle before the music begins sounds like rain on tin. And then voice, deep, impossible, ghostly. It fills the room, echoing from the horn like something conjured from another world. You feel the astonishment that Edwardian listeners must have felt, that strange thrill of hearing presence without body, a human breath preserved in machinery. For a moment, no one speaks. The room is suspended between centuries, gaslight and gramophone, lace and revolution. You realize how modernity is already creeping in, dressed in velvet and gilt. The record ends with a hiss and silence folds over the room once more. Someone laughs quietly, half embarrassed at having been moved. Someone else fans herself with a music book. The pianist rises, stretching her hands, shaking out her wrists. Tea appears again, because in the Edwardian home, tea was the punctuation of every emotion. Cups clink, conversation resumes. One woman mentions she's begun attending lectures on musical appreciation. Another confides that she once dreamed of studying composition, but her father didn't think it proper. The others murmur sympathetically, though no one seems surprised. Outside, through the curtained window, a light rain begins to fall. It patters softly against the glass, keeping time with the slow ticking of the mantel clock. The fire settles into a deep orange glow. You think of all the evenings like this that once unfolded across England, rooms filled with laughter, gossip, melodies half forgotten now. Parlor music may have faded, but its echoes linger in every piano left to gather dust, every cracked record found in an attic. The lady returns to the piano once more before bed when the others have gone. This time, she plays not for company but for herself. A small tune, tender, improvised. You can hear her hum faintly under her breath. This, you sense, is the truest moment of her day, the moment she is no longer performing. Her reflection shimmers faintly in the piano's black varnish, candlelight painting her face with gold. She closes her eyes. The last note hovers in the air like a sigh, then dissolves. The room exhales with her. By the time the piano's echo has faded from the halls, the house has turned soft with shadows. You follow the scent of something faint and floral through a corridor, violet, perhaps, or heliotrope, and find yourself standing before the dressing room once more. It's later now, quieter. The fire is low, and the gas lamp burns dim beneath a silken shade trimmed in pale tassels. This is the hour of perfume and powder, the private time that Edwardian women guarded like treasure. Here, in the hush after the music and before sleep, self-care becomes something more intimate, more dreamlike, half ritual, half reverie. The lady sits at her vanity again, but the scene has changed. Morning's rosewater calm has given way to evening opulence. The table gleams with little bottles, cut glass, frosted crystal, and slender atomizers with silk pumps shaped like seashells. Their contents shimmer faintly amber in the lamplight. You watch as she lifts one. The label says Florentine Essence. A whiff of violet and sandalwood escapes as she spritzes it into the air. For a moment, the whole room smells like a secret. Perfume was one of the few indulgences Edwardian women could claim as entirely their own. Each scent told a coded story. Violets for modesty, roses for passion, lavender for calm. Society dictated what was appropriate for a lady, floral and faint, never musky, never bold. But privately, the rules blurred. In the sanctuary of her dressing room, she could dab on something richer, something that whispered what her corset could not. She leans closer to the mirror, tilts her head and begins to powder her face with a soft puff of swan's down. The powder is pale as moonlight, faintly scented with orris root. A light dusting across the forehead, the cheeks, the chin. The transformation is subtle but deliberate. You notice the half-smile she wears as she works, not vanity exactly, but self-possession. It's the same look a painter gives to her canvas before the final stroke. A hairpin slips and she catches it, laughs softly to herself. From a drawer she takes a small tin labeled pomade hongrais, a fashionable concoction of bare grease and oil of roses, used to smooth stray hairs and add shine. The scent, faintly sweet and faintly animal, fills the air. It's both strange and oddly human. Fashion, she murmurs, echoing something she's read in a magazine, is the poetry of appearances. You realize how much of Edwardian beauty culture revolved around contradiction, innocence laced with desire, artifice masked as natural grace. The magazines of the day, the Queen, the Lady's Realm, Modern Society, overflowed with advice on maintaining freshness and complexion health, as though youth itself were a moral obligation. Historians still argue whether the Edwardian beauty ideal, milk-pale skin, tiny waist, soft curls, was a reflection of luxury or a symptom of restraint. Was it empowerment to perfect oneself, or simply another form of performance for the male gaze? The debate, like the powder in the air, never quite settles. She reaches for a string of pearls next, small, lustrous, cool to the touch. They rest against her collarbone with a quiet click. Then a broachy, tiny, enameled forget-me-nots. Her jewelry box is modest, yet each piece carries meaning. Tokens of courtship, anniversaries, and friendships long faded. A small hand mirror lies on the table, silver, oval, its surface smudged with fingerprints. She turns it in her hands, studying her reflection as though reading her own past in its glass. You can see the fatigue there, the grace worn thin by years of small expectations, yet also something else, defiance or maybe self-recognition. She sighs, sets the mirror down. The movement feels final, like closing a book. From the top shelf of a cabinet, she retrieves a bottle of violet toilet water, cheaper than perfume but no less cherished. A few drops are poured into her palms and pressed to her neck. The pulse points at her wrists. She inhales deeply, eyes closed. You notice on the wall a framed print, a faintly scandalous Art Nouveau illustration of a woman reclining among lilies, her hair a cascade of gold. It's not what you'd expect in such a house. There's a certain boldness to it. Perhaps it's a quiet rebellion, hidden in plain sight. On the vanity lies a slim volume bound in blue cloth, hints for the complexion and toilet. The margins are annotated in faint pencil notes, experiments, perhaps even recipes. One page describes a skin tonic of cucumber and elderflower. Another, a pomade to encourage luxuriant lashes. You imagine her following these rituals like spells, not merely for beauty but for control, for rhythm in a life that rarely belonged to her. In the corner stands a dressing screen painted with chrysanthemums. Behind it, a nightgown hangs, a cloud of white lawn trimmed with lace. You watch her slip behind the screen, hear the faint rustle of fabric, the whisper of stays unhooking. The sound is almost like a sigh. When she emerges, the change is subtle but profound. Without the corset, her silhouette softens, her movements loosen. She looks younger, freer. She runs her fingers through her hair until it falls in waves over her shoulders, the lamplight catching each strand. In this unguarded state, she seems almost like another person, no longer the lady of the house, but simply a woman, warm and mortal, surrounded by small luxuries she's claimed as fragments of identity. You think of how perfume, powder, and silk were not merely adornments, but symbols, tools of self-making in an age that offered few such choices. Through these rituals, Edwardian women could momentarily define themselves, not as wives or daughters, but as individuals with scent, color, and softness of their own choosing. The lamp flickers as she opens the window. Cool night air drifts in, mingling with the perfumes. a mingled breath of earth and elegance. Outside, the garden hums with distant crickets. She leans on the sill for a moment, breathing deeply. Below, the gaslights of the street glow faintly through the fog, their halos trembling like dreams. Somewhere a carriage rattles by. Somewhere a clock strikes 10. When she turns back into the room, she moves with a strange serenity. She dabs her wrists once more with perfume, extinguishes the lamp, and leaves only the glow of the hearth. You remain for a while in that faint, perfume-thick air, feeling the weight of silence and the lingering warmth of her presence. There is something hauntingly modern about her rituals, a woman reclaiming control through the only tools she's been allowed: scent, texture, reflection. It is perhaps the purest kind of defiance, beauty as survival, vanity as self-preservation. The fire cracks, releasing a tiny plume of light. The room holds its breath. Outside, the fog has thickened into a gauzy veil across the lawns. The garden that once glimmered with late roses now lies muted, its paths silvered with dew. You can hear the faint hiss of gas lamps through the mist, like sighs from another age. And in the upper rooms of the house, light still glows behind drawn lace curtains. You follow that faint shimmer of lamplight into a new chamber, warmer, fuller of life. It's the nursery. The Edwardian nursery was its own small kingdom, part schoolroom, part playroom, part dream world of toys and morals. The walls are papered in pale blue with tiny rabbits and parasols printed in repeat. The hearth burns low, casting a soft amber light across a clutter of wooden blocks, alphabet cards, and a rocking horse whose mane has long since frayed into soft tufts. You can hear laughter, muffled, bubbling, full of the exhaustion that comes only after a long day of lessons and tea. 2 children tumble on the rug, a boy in a sailor suit and a girl with a ribbon loose in her hair. Their governess sits nearby, reading aloud from Peter Pan, her voice lilting like a lullaby. And so the children flew away over the rooftops of London, past the stars and into Neverland. The boy's eyes are wide, the girl's mouth opens in wonder. You watch as their mother, the same woman from the dressing room, leans quietly in the doorway. She does not interrupt, but the look on her face is one of soft ache. In Edwardian households, mothers and children often lived in different worlds. The nursery belonged to the domain of nannies and governesses. Affection was managed through visits, schedules, and well-meant propriety. But tonight, her expression betrays the limits of that distance. She steps inside, the children rush to her, and for a moment, etiquette dissolves. She kneels to embrace them, her perfume mingling with the faint scent of chalk and wax crayons. "Tell us the story again, Mama," the little girl begs. The mother glances at the governess, who nods in permission. She smiles, takes the book, and continues the tale herself, reading softly, almost dreamily. The rhythm of her voice fills the room, slow and melodic. You realize this isn't only for the children, it's a lullaby for herself, a moment to escape into the same realm of imagination she once inhabited before marriage, before the weight of silk gowns and household expectations. When she finishes, the children are nearly asleep. She tucks them beneath their coverlets, embroidered with initials and faded ribbons, and hums a tune you half recognize, something between a hymn and a folk song. You notice the little things, the way her hand lingers on their foreheads, the gentleness in her gesture. In an era that prized restraint, such tenderness feels radical, almost rebellious. She extinguishes the lamp, leaves only the nightlight burning low in its glass dome, and steps back into the corridor. The hallway is lined with portraits, ancestors in stiff collars and crinolines, their painted eyes following her as she passes. Downstairs, the servants are extinguishing candles one by one. The great house is retreating into sleep. Yet there's still one sound that stirs through the silence, a faint humming, rhythmic and metallic. You follow it curious and discover its source behind a heavy oak door at the far end of the hall. The hinges creak. The air grows warmer, more fragrant with steam. It's the laundry room, In this glowing half-basement, the maids are finishing their final tasks. A copper boiler simmers, releasing clouds of vapor that catch the lamplight like gold dust. Shirts, corset covers, and lace petticoats hang drying on wooden racks. The scent of starch, soap, and lavender water is everywhere. A young laundress, her sleeves rolled up, her hair pinned in haste, plunges her arms into the steaming water, scrubbing linen against a washboard. Her hands are red from the heat, but her face is serene, almost luminous. She hums the same tune you heard upstairs. It strikes you that this too is a kind of ritual. Just as the lady's vanity was a ceremony of self-adornment, this is a ceremony of preservation, of fabric, form, dignity. The women who laundered the Edwardian household performed invisible miracles, maintaining whiteness in an age obsessed with purity, ironing out the creases of an entire social world. You watch as another maid folds a nightdress, smoothing its lace collar with tender precision. It's the same nightdress you saw earlier in the dressing room. There's an odd symmetry in that, the same fabric passing from hand to hand, linking two lives separated by class but joined in rhythm. For a moment the laundress looks up, catching your gaze. Her expression is neither deferential nor shy. It's knowing. Perhaps she too understands that all these rituals, the washing, the perfuming, the polishing, are threads in the same tapestry of survival. The head housemaid enters with a candle, inspects the folded linen, and nods approvingly. "Good work, girls, now off to bed." They curtsy, hang up their aprons, and climb the narrow servant staircase, whispering softly. When the door closes, the only sound left is the faint drip of cooling water and the tick of a clock somewhere beyond the wall. You wander through the stillness. In a corner, a forgotten bar of soap glistens like ivory. A window above the sink reveals the fog thinning over the moonlit lawns. The night is deep, but not lonely. The house itself seems to breathe, its rhythms of labor and rest still pulsing through wood and brass. The Edwardian home was often described as a machine of grace, beautiful, ordered, endlessly maintained. Yet what made it live were these unseen moments. The hand that scrubbed, the voice that sang, the mother who paused in a doorway. You return to the upper floor. The air has cooled. In the master bedroom, the fire is nearly out, a single log glowing like an embered heart. The lady of the house lies in bed now, her hair loose, her hands folded over the quilt. On her nightstand, a small glass of water catches the faint light. Beside it lies a single letter, folded, sealed with blue wax. She doesn't open it tonight. She simply glances toward it once, then closes her eyes. You can almost hear her thoughts drift between gratitude and yearning, between what she has and what she dreams might still be possible. The house falls completely still. Outside, dawn is a distant promise. Inside, the Edwardian night keeps its quiet pulse, perfume fatting, linen cooling, dreams unfurling like lace in slow motion. The fog begins to lift. Rain, you hear it first before you even open your eyes, a soft, unhurried drumming against the glass panes. It sounds like a polite applause from another century, the kind that never grows impatient. You can almost feel the chill of the Edwardian morning as it seeps through the lace curtains, making the air taste faintly of damp linen and coal smoke. The world outside is all pewter gray, a row of polished chimneys exhaling steam, a milk cart clinking faintly down the street, the rhythmic patter of water on flagstones. Inside, however, life stirs quietly beneath embroidered counterpanes and starched sheets. You find yourself once again in the bedroom of Our Lady of the House, still and silvered in the morning gloom. She stirs beneath her quilt, blinking toward the sliver of light that sneaks past the curtain edge. There's no alarm clock yet, only the dependable ticking of a brass carriage clock and the whisper of rain. The day begins not with urgency but with ritual. Before she even rises, a soft knock sounds at the adjoining door. The maid enters carrying a tray tea in a bone china cup, 2 sugar cubes, and a single slice of lemon balanced delicately on a spoon. She moves silently, as if trained to glide rather than walk, and draws the curtains just enough to let in a sigh of daylight. The lady sits up, shoulders wrapped in a quilted dressing gown the color of faded violets. "Thank you, Clara," she murmurs, her voice still hushed by dreams. The maid nods, then begins to lay out the day's attire: corset, camisole, chemise, and the pale morning gown for breakfast. The sound of silk sliding over silk fills the room like the whisper of secrets. Edwardian mornings, you realize, were not rushed but orchestrated. Every detail, temperature, lighting, even the sequence of sounds, was part of a daily overture. Where the night had belonged to quiet yearning and perfume, the morning belonged to grace and continuity. Our Lady takes a slow sip of her tea, watching raindrops chase one another down the window. "Looks dreadful," she says softly. "I suppose it's a day for the hearth." The maid smiles faintly. "Better that than a day for errands, ma'am." A little laugh, a small rebellion against propriety. Downstairs, you can hear the faint murmur of servants beginning their duties. Coal scuttles against iron grates, bread toasts on the open range. The kitchen is alive again, even as the sky outside sulks in shades of gray. The rain thickens. Historians still argue whether Edwardian homes were truly as tranquil as the photographs suggest, or if that serenity was simply another illusion, crafted through the lens of comfort and class. But in this moment, the illusion feels real enough. A cocoon of warmth against the chill, lace against glass, a woman's sigh woven into the rhythm of the rain. The lady rises at last. She moves with the slow confidence of someone who knows her place in the world, and yet carries a private distance from it. While the maid fastens the hooks of her corset, she gazes into the mirror, catching her own reflection as though meeting an old acquaintance. It's hard not to notice the subtle melancholy in her eyes. Not sadness exactly, but that peculiar Edwardian stillness, the way emotion hides behind poise. Once dressed, she walks to the sitting room adjoining her bedroom. It's a smaller space, meant for her alone. Here the fire already burns low, and a few books lie scattered on a delicate table, Tennyson, perhaps, or Galsworthy's The Man of Property. She opens one absently, fingers brushing the margin where she once scribbled something faint in pencil. A page turn, a pause. The sound of rain continues, soft and ceaseless. Then the household awakens fully. Bells ring for breakfast. A faint waft of bacon and toast reaches the upper floor. She closes the book, stands, and moves toward the hall. In the dining room, light filters through tall, rain-streaked windows. The table is immaculate, starched linen, silver gleaming like small moons. Her husband is already there, hidden behind a newspaper, coffee steaming beside him. He lowers it slightly, nodding with a mild smile. "Terrible weather," he remarks. "The garden will flood again." "Yes," she says, "but the roses will thank it later." Their conversation flows easily, if predictably. Domestic politics, the day's plans, the latest mention of the king's health. These were the rituals that defined Edwardian mornings, the calm choreography of routine, where affection lived quietly in tone rather than touch. She eats little, preferring tea and toast, then excuses herself to the morning room, a sunny chamber even on a wet day, lined with books, papers, and embroidery hoops. A cat curls on the armchair. The sound of rain has softened now, more like fingertips on silk. You linger near her as she settles with her embroidery. Each stitch draws the morning into focus. The house is quiet except for the rhythmic pull of thread and the occasional sigh of the wind at the chimney. It's strange, isn't it? How an entire world once revolved around such domestic calm. Women like her ruled these interiors, not with force but with subtle orchestration. The flowers, the tea trays, the steady domestic rituals, they were her kingdom, her art. Yet beneath that lacework of order lay a quiet ache for something unspoken, a wish to do more, to see more, to be more. A drop of rain lands with a plink on the windowsill. She looks up, distracted. The maid enters with a letter, blue envelope, thin handwriting. From Mrs. Lennox, ma'am. She says there's to be a charity bazaar next week. Ah, splendid, the lady replies, though her voice suggests mild weariness. You can tell she's thinking of the endless cycles of charitable tea parties and social niceties. Even leisure in this world comes with etiquette. She opens the letter anyway, reading it while the rain begins to light. A faint smile crosses her face, perhaps at some piece of gossip hidden between polite lines. By noon, the light grows softer, golden again where it pierces the thinning clouds. The rain has slowed to a mist. She rises, stretches, and glances at the clock. Time for the next ritual. She walks to the conservatory, a glass chamber at the back of the house, fragrant with damp soil and geraniums. Drops of water glitter on the leaves. She bends slightly to touch a fern, its fronds trembling under her fingers. You notice how at ease she seems here, surrounded by green things. The Edwardians adored their conservatories. They were symbols of domestic refinement, little slices of Eden trapped under glass. But to her, this isn't status, it's solace. The rain returns briefly, tapping the panes with a softer rhythm now, like applause fatting at the end of a performance. She closes her eyes, inhales the earthy scent, and for a heartbeat the house fades. The world shrinks to breath, warmth, and the shimmer of droplets on glass. You think this might be the closest thing she has to prayer. And when she finally turns to leave, her hand brushes the doorframe as though sealing that calm inside her. Outside, the day resumes. The cook shouts for the scullery maid. The post arrives. The world hums on. The morning's grace dissolves quietly into motion. Still, you can't shake the sense that something precious happened here. Not dramatic, but deeply human. Just a woman, a room, a little rain, and a moment of stillness in which all the noise of history fell away. The rain has thinned to a mere mist, that soft gauze of moisture that hangs over the hedgerows like unspun silk. The fire downstairs has been stoked again, and the comforting scent of coal and toast lingers faintly through the air. It is nearly evening now, an Edwardian evening in its prime, quiet yet taut with expectation. You hear it first, the distant grind of carriage wheels on wet gravel, the muffled clop of a horse pulling up before the house. The front door opens, the sound swelling into the calm like a dropped stone in water. A man's low voice, the shuffle of a hat and coat handed off to the butler, the brief clearing of a throat, signs that the world of men has returned home. The husband is back. In the drawing room, the glow of lamplight shifts, catching on the brass fittings and glass. The lady of the house looks up from her embroidery, straightens slightly, and tucks the loose thread beneath the needle. The transformation is quiet but visible, a posture perfected through habit. The private rhythm of her day folds neatly into the public rhythm of evening decorum. He enters the room, tall, broad-shouldered, still smelling faintly of rain and tobacco. His cheeks are pink from the damp, his mustache glistens slightly. "Well," he says, unbuttoning his gloves, "the city is chaos, trains delayed, meetings endless, and the cab horses nervous as kittens." She smiles, the polite echo of his complaint. "You made it home in good time, though. The roads must be dreadful." They were, but I thought, better to endure the weather than another hour with Linton and his infernal charts. She laughs softly, just the right amount. There's warmth between them, genuine but measured, shaped by years of shared expectations and separate worlds. The maid enters to announce dinner, and they move together toward the dining room. The household hums to attention. Servants glide into their rehearsed positions. Every plate gleams. Every napkin is folded like origami precision. Dinner itself unfolds like a polite theater piece. Soup, fish, roast, pudding. The husband recounts news from the city, stock prices, parliamentary rumors, the scandal of a duchess's runaway daughter. The wife listens, nods, occasionally interjects with the mild humor of someone who knows precisely when to speak and when to let silence decorate the air. And yet you sense something underneath, a faint current of inner observation, her mind tracing other paths while her body remains poised. She studies his gestures, the cadence of his speech, the way the candlelight flickers across his cufflinks. Perhaps she wonders how much of the man before her still remembers the thrill of their courtship years ago, when letters were written in haste and long walks were the only luxury of privacy. Historians still argue whether Edwardian marriages were built more on affection or on duty. Some claim the domestic ideal was simply performance, a well-acted partnership wrapped in etiquette. Others insist there was real tenderness, just quiet and carefully controlled. Watching these two, you realize it's both. Love here is less about passion and more about constancy, the steady pulse beneath the lace. After dinner, he retires briefly to his study. The room smells of leather, pipe smoke, and paper, the masculine sanctum of the house. Books line the walls, many unopened for years, their spines glinting like trophies. The lamp casts an amber circle over his desk where letters await, business correspondence, a club invitation, a note from an old friend at the War Office. He sighs, strikes a match, and lights his pipe. The rain outside resumes its faint percussion against the window. Meanwhile, upstairs, she has returned to her sitting room. The maid lights a single lamp and draws the curtains. The lady removes her jewelry one piece at a time, earrings first, then the brooch, then the slender ring she always wears though its gold has thinned with years. She looks out at the wet street where carriages pass in the glow of the gaslights. The sight feels distant, almost cinematic. You can almost hear her thoughts again. This is the life I was taught to want. Why does it feel like waiting? Downstairs, the clock strikes 9. The husband finishes his pipe and joins her by the fire. He brings with him the smell of smoke and faint rain, and she shifts slightly to make room on the sofa. "Do you remember," he says suddenly, "the seaside at Whitby that summer before we married?" She blinks, surprised. "Of course. You got sunburnt and pretended it was bravery." He chuckles, rubbing his neck. "And you dropped your hat into the tide. You were furious at me for laughing." The laughter that follows is easy, genuine. The years between them soften just a little. You realize that the house, so formal and composed, is capable of tenderness after all. It just wears a corset of routine. The fire pops, the rain sighs against the window panes, and the moment lingers. Then, as if on cue, the clock chimes again. The spell breaks. He stands, stretches, and declares he'll read a bit before bed. She nods, gathering her embroidery once more. It's the rhythm of their world. Connection and distance, warmth and restraint, all choreographed beneath the ticking of clocks. Later, when the servants have gone and the lamps are dimmed, you wander through the quiet rooms. The husband's study door stands ajar. You glimpse him asleep in his armchair, pipe extinguished, newspaper folded across his lap. Upstairs, the lady writes a line or two in her diary, careful to keep the handwriting neat. You catch a few words as her pen scratches across the page. Rain again. "The roses will bloom late this year. I dreamed of music and the sea." She closes the book, turns off the lamp, and for a long moment stands by the window, watching the faint halo of gaslight shimmer on the wet cobblestones. The house breathes around her, soft, rhythmic, eternal. And somewhere in that hush between wakefulness and dream, the world of men and women, their roles, their rituals, their delicate performances, seems to dissolve into something tender, unknowable, and infinitely human. The morning returns with a soft pallor of gray-blue light, filtering gently through the lace curtains. The air feels washed clean by the night's rain, that faint, mineral smell of wet stone and iron lingering in every room. The house wakes slowly, as if aware that its quiet elegance depends on never hurrying. You find the lady once more at her dressing table, though this time the ritual is different. There's no corset waiting beside her, no bustle of maids arranging gowns. Instead, a book lies open beside the mirror, its title written in gold leaf. "The Woman Beautiful, a handbook of modern grace and health." It's one of those Edwardian dream manuals that promise serenity through science, or at least the illusion of it. These volumes whispered advice about complexion and virtue in the same breath, suggesting that moral calm could tighten the skin as effectively as cold cream. She reads aloud softly, smiling at the absurdity. A lady's rest should be as pure and regular as the unfolding of a white rose at dawn. You can't help but smile, too. The Edwardians loved metaphors that made women sound like furniture, flowers, or fragile instruments that needed constant tuning. Yet here she is, real, alive, breathing quietly in her lace robe, half believing, half amused. She sets the book aside and examines herself in the mirror. The faint lines at her eyes, the pallor beneath her skin. Perhaps, she murmurs, I am unfolding a little late. A soft knock interrupts her reverie. The maid enters with a tray, porridge, toast, and a small bottle of tonic labeled Dr. Williams, pink pills for pale people. You can almost hear the advertiser's voice echoing across time. For women weakened by nervous exhaustion, sleeplessness, or melancholy, revive your vitality. Historians still argue whether these tonics did anything at all beyond coloring the urine pink. But for Edwardian women, they were less about chemistry and more about control. One small thing to believe in when emotions were prescribed as illnesses. Our Lady unscrews the bottle, inspects it, and sets it down with a soft laugh. No, thank you. I think I'll try a walk instead. Outside, the garden glistens with the aftermath of rain. Dew pearls on every leaf, and the gravel crunches softly under her slippers. She moves slowly through the path bordered by roses and lavender, the air rich with scent. The world feels private again, enclosed, alive. For all its gentility, Edwardian life was haunted by a strange obsession. Rest cures, nerve tonics, health retreats, seaside convalescence. Women were constantly being told to rest, yet their rest was always supervised, always measured. You could lie in a chaise for weeks, but not in rebellion, only in delicate surrender. Our Lady, however, does not look ill. She looks thoughtful. She plucks a single sprig of lavender, holds it to her nose, and closes her eyes as though inhaling courage. Back inside, she passes the morning room where the piano stands waiting. The lid is slightly open, its keys yellowing at the edges. She sits, hesitates, then plays a quiet melody, simple, repetitive, dreamlike. The sound is both lullaby and confession. You imagine that she hasn't played for anyone in years. Music, once part of her courtship, has become private again, a kind of conversation she can only have with herself. The melody lingers, trembling faintly in the air, until a noise from upstairs breaks the spell, a faint clatter followed by a sigh. She rises and follows the sound. It comes from the guest room where her cousin Eleanor has been staying these past few weeks. Eleanor is younger, recently widowed, and pale in the way society calls delicate. She's seated on the edge of the bed, wrapped in a shawl, her eyes hollow yet bright. I couldn't sleep again, Eleanor whispers. The dreams came back. Our Lady sits beside her, takes her hand. Did you take the powder? I did. It helps for a few hours, then I wake and the walls feel. She pauses, searching. Too close. That phrase hangs heavy. Too close. The Edwardian home, for all its beauty, could indeed feel like a gilded cage, especially for women confined by mourning, propriety, or reputation. Our Lady squeezes her cousin's hand. Come with me to the garden after breakfast. You need air, not powders. Eleanor smiles weakly. If the doctor hears you say that, he'll prescribe a scandal. They laugh softly, and in that laugh is something radical, two women sharing defiance beneath the veneer of gentility. Later that day, when the husband has gone to the city again, the cousins stroll through the conservatory. The filtered light makes their faces glow with a faint greenish hue. Eleanor touches a fern leaf, tracing its edge. You're lucky, she says. You make this house look like peace. Peace, Our Lady murmurs. Yes, though sometimes I think it's just silence wearing perfume. The phrase hangs between them like smoke. They walk on in companionable quiet, their skirts brushing the damp floor tiles, the rain beginning again beyond the glass. Somewhere in the distance, the clock chimes noon, a reminder that even stillness has a schedule. By afternoon, Our Lady returns to her writing desk. She opens a fresh sheet of paper and begins a letter, not to a friend, not to a family member, but to herself. You read over her shoulder. To the woman I might have been, if there had been more time, more courage, and fewer curtains drawn between the world and me. She pauses, the pen hovering, then draws a line through the sentence, folds the paper neatly and tucks it into a drawer. It's enough for now simply to have written it. Evening approaches. The house breathes its slow rhythm again, firelight, quiet voices, the gentle shuffle of slippers on the staircase. She lights a lavender candle by her bedside, a small rebellion against the plain white ones her husband prefers. The room fills with soft scent, warm and clean. She takes one last look in the mirror, her reflection hazy in the candlelight. Then she blows out the flame, leaving only the faint shimmer of the embers in the grate. As she settles beneath the covers, the words from her dream manual echo faintly. Rest should be pure and regular as a white rose at dawn. You think she's earned her rest, not because she obeyed, but because she found her own way to sleep. Outside, the rain continues, gentle, endless, a lullaby for women who were told to lie still and call it serenity, even as their hearts kept whispering other stories. The morning drifts in again, pale and hesitant, as if unsure whether to disturb the quiet peace that lingers in the house. You wake to the sound of distant church bells and the faint rustle of curtains moving in the soft breeze. The air smells faintly of lavender and polished oak, that distinct Edwardian mixture of restraint and comfort. Downstairs, the drawing room waits in its formal order. The piano closed now, the chairs symmetrically arranged, a book of sermons lying precisely at the center of the table. But there is another sound beneath the stillness, a gentle hum, almost like a sigh turning into a tune. It's her again, the lady of the house, humming as she tends to her plants on the windowsill. The sunlight catches her hair, turning it the color of old gold. Her movements are slow, deliberate, graceful in that unteachable way that Edwardian etiquette prized. Poise, they called it, though what it really meant was control. She waters the geraniums with the care of someone tending something more fragile than flowers, perhaps her own quiet resolve. The petals glow red in the light, like little hearts that refuse to fade. On the mantelpiece rests a small invitation card embossed in silver. Lady Ashcombe's garden party, June 4th, 1908. It's one of the season's important events, a display of wealth, fashion, and gossip wrapped in the scent of roses and lemon sherbet. She studies the card, lips pressed thin. Such gatherings used to thrill her once, the lace gowns, the parasols, the glances across lawns that meant everything and nothing. But lately, she finds herself weary of it all. Still, appearances are a currency, and she is too wise to spend hers carelessly. Her maid enters, holding two gowns, one pale blue, the other cream silk with tiny embroidered violets. "This one suits the morning light better, ma'am," the maid suggests softly. "Yes," she says after a pause, touching the cream fabric. "Something simple." But simple in Edwardian terms still means hours of preparation, corsetry, petticoats, gloves, hatpins, the silent labor of other hands. You watch as the ritual unfolds again, the fastening of stays, the smoothing of lace, the brushing of hair until it shines like spun metal. When at last she steps outside, she looks every inch the picture of composure. Her carriage waits at the gate, its lacquer gleaming, the driver upright and solemn. As she climbs in, she catches her reflection in the window, not her face, but her posture, the image of what society insists she must be: elegant, serene, complete. The journey to Lady Ashcombe's estate winds through fields and hedgerows. The world outside seems to shimmer haystacks, white fences, and the occasional cyclist whirring by in a blur of motion. The countryside, like the lady herself, appears unchanging. But beneath the surface, everything is beginning to move. Electric lights, motor cars, suffragettes marching in white. The century is turning quietly beneath the lace. At the party, parasols bloom like pastel flowers across the lawn. Servants glide between guests with trays of lemonade and cucumber sandwiches. Laughter drifts through the air, soft and practiced. Lady Ashcombe herself, broad and resplendent in lilac satin, greets her guests with the force of a queen presiding over her own small kingdom. "Ah, Mrs. Whitcomb," she exclaims, "you look divine this season. That shade of cream, is it worth?" "It's a local copy," Our Lady replies with a modest smile, "but I suppose it carries well enough." The two women laugh politely, the kind of laugh that keeps both power and affection at a safe distance. Nearby, the young women cluster around a gramophone, a novelty that draws more attention than the music itself. The record crackles and hisses, but the melody, a waltz, still manages to fill the garden with its trembling joy. Eleanor, the cousin, has joined her today, dressed in pale lilac mourning half lifted. She looks brighter in the sunlight, her eyes curious rather than clouded. The two women exchange a glance, a shared understanding that this world, though beautiful, is a performance neither of them fully believes in anymore. "Do you ever wonder," Eleanor says quietly as they stand together beneath a chestnut tree, "whether all this is only a dream, a very long, expensive dream that will fade before we wake?" Our Lady looks around at the laughter, the lace, the music trembling through the summer air. "Perhaps," she says, "but dreams can be kind, and sometimes that's enough." They walk together toward the Rose Arch, where a photographer is arranging guests for a group portrait. "Hold still, ladies," he says, his head half hidden beneath the black cloth of his camera. "Lovely, just there. Now look toward the light." They obey. The shutter clicks a small, decisive sound and freezes the moment forever. Two women side by side, their eyes lifted toward something just beyond sight. That photograph will one day fade, its edges curling, the colors bleeding away. But the faint traces of sunlight on their faces will remain, proof of life, of laughter, of a brief rebellion wrapped in silk. As the carriage carries them home that evening, the road glows with the last light of day. Eleanor leans her head against the window, half dreaming. "You know," she says softly, "I think we're all waiting for something, though none of us knows quite what." Her cousin smiles faintly. "Perhaps we're waiting to live." The road winds onward, the countryside darkening into a tapestry of shadows and stars. The air smells of rain again, that gentle, persistent rhythm that seems to stitch all their days together. Back at the house, the maid lights the lamps, and the golden glow returns to the walls. The lady removes her gloves slowly, one finger at a time, as though shedding another layer of expectation. She looks toward the piano. For a moment she seems tempted, but then she only sighs, extinguishes the light, and lets the quiet close around her. In that hush, you can almost hear the faint echo of the waltz still playing, a memory, a promise, a pulse beneath the stillness of Edwardian grace. The photograph still sits upon the mantel, framed in brass and just beginning to tarnish. You notice it whenever the firelight flickers low. Two women, one in cream, the other in lilac, caught in a moment that looks effortless, almost eternal. But time, as always, has its quiet way of rearranging things. It's autumn now. The roses in the garden have browned, and the air carries that particular chill that slips between seams and buttons. You watch as she folds away her lighter gowns and lifts the heavier fabrics from the cedar chest, velvet, wool, a whisper of mothballs and old perfume. Evening comes earlier these days, and with it, the slow return of ritual. Lamps lit at 4 instead of 6, curtains drawn before the street gaslights flare, a single candle flickering by her writing desk as she reaches for her pen. The house, too, seems to exhale differently now. The laughter of summer is gone, replaced by the hush of preparation. Tea trays are smaller, fires burn lower, and the maid hums softly as she polishes the silver in the next room. Somewhere far off, a phonograph plays a crackling waltz. You might think that nothing changes here, that Edwardian life drifts forever in honey-colored stillness. But beneath that stillness, the world trembles. There are murmurs of unrest in the papers, talk of votes for women, strikes, suffragettes, and that German situation. The headlines are distant thunder, but the tremor reaches even this quiet parlor. She reads the papers carefully, folding them with clean fingers, avoiding the ink. So much noise, she murmurs. So little grace left in the world. Yet when she writes to her sister, her words are gentler, thoughts of chrysanthemums, of a new hat she might order from London, of how quickly the evenings shorten. Historians still argue whether Edwardian women like her knew how close their world stood to ending. Perhaps they sensed it, the way a bird senses a storm, by silence, by change in the air, by the way conversations began to falter before the fire. Sometimes she opens the old family album, turning its pages with a wistful smile. There she is as a bride, barely 20, her hair like spun copper and her expression uncertain. Then as a new mother, holding a son swaddled in lace. Then beside her husband, his mustache impeccable, his stance firm, both of them frozen in the polite armor of their class. Now in the dim light she looks between those faces and her reflection in the glass. The woman staring back is softer, the features worn smooth by years of smiles and silences. And yet, there's still a spark there, a quiet resistance, a light that never learned how to extinguish itself. On the small table beside her sits a perfume bottle, cut glass, shaped like a teardrop. Its label is faded, the scent inside mellowed by age. She uncorks it now and then just to breathe in what remains. Violets, rosewater, a faint trace of something sharper. It's a smell that belongs to her younger self, the one who once dreamt of art, of music, of walking unchaperoned through the city streets. Her husband is away more often now. London meetings, gentlemen's clubs, affairs of business that she no longer asks about. The household runs like a clock wound by invisible hands. Meals arrive at precise hours, linens are folded to precise edges, and the maid's footsteps mark the passage of each day. Yet in the evenings, when the house falls quiet, she sometimes does something unexpected. She takes out the notebook she hides behind the lace handkerchiefs, a plain book with soft, worn pages, and writes. Not letters, not lists, but thoughts. Fragments of poems, snatches of overheard conversation, questions without answers. What is a woman's time worth if no one remembers how she spent it? She writes once. Another page reads, a house can be a cage even when it's beautiful. If you lean close enough, you can hear the scratch of her pen, steady as breath. The act itself feels radical, though she would never call it that. It's a conversation with herself, spoken into paper because there's nowhere else for it to go. Sometimes the maid passes by the half-open door, hearing the faint sound of ink on paper, and smiles to herself. She knows better than to disturb that kind of silence. Outside, the rain begins again, soft and endless. The gutter drips. The coal crackles. In the hearthlight, the brass picture frame glints faintly, the photograph of two women under the garden's arch, forever turned toward the light. You can almost sense that photograph breathing, as though it still carries the hum of that summer's air, the unspoken yearning in their eyes. They could not know, of course, that within a decade the world that framed them would vanish. The corsets, the calling cards, the evenings of quiet tea and whispered discontent. But tonight that world still lives in the lamplight. The lace curtain sways as the fire sighs, and the scent of violets rises again, faint but insistent. You might say it's nostalgia. You might say it's memory, but perhaps it's something stronger, the echo of women who learned to carve freedom out of stillness. For centuries they were told that silence was virtue, that softness was strength. And perhaps, in this house at least, that was true. Every polished surface, Every folded gown, every half-finished poem in a hidden notebook becomes a quiet monument to survival. As the clock strikes 9, she closes the notebook, tucks it away, and stands. Her candle burns low, its flame a trembling gold petal. In that small light, she looks not like a relic of a bygone era, but like the keeper of something sacred, something that endures beyond lace and lanterns. And when she finally turns to the window, her reflection overlaps the darkening street outside, a ghostly double, suspended between past and present. You realize then that what remains of the Edwardian home is not its furniture or its etiquette, but this very glow, the soft, stubborn illumination of women who refuse to vanish, even when the world preferred them dim. The air smells faintly of rain and coal dust, the sort of scent that settles into old houses and never quite leaves. You're still here, in the same quiet drawing room where the story began, but something in the air feels different now. Outside, the street lamps hum with electricity instead of gas. Their light is colder, cleaner, less forgiving. The world has changed. The lady of the house, once the very embodiment of Edwardian composure, moves through her rooms like a ghost trying to remember its own outline. The war took her son, her husband's fortune has dwindled, and the house itself, this great monument of lace and polish, has become far too large for one heartbeat. You follow her through the hall. The wallpaper is fading, the gold trim looks tired. The mirrors that once reflected youth and company now catch only her and the dust motes turning in thin sunlight. Yet she keeps the place immaculate. To clean, to polish, to arrange. It's what she's always known, the only rhythm that remains hers. The gramophone in the corner still works, though the records are warped from heat. She winds the handle and sets the needle down. A waltz stirs to life, thin, scratchy, but determined. She smiles, a faint, crooked smile, and lets it play while she sits in her armchair with her mending basket. A historian once wrote that the Edwardian era was the last age of the domestic goddess. Historians still argue whether that title was praise or a polite prison sentence. For women like her, it was both. Now, as the world beyond her door rushes ahead with motor cars, suffrage victories, and cinema, she clings to this slower ritual of being. There's something defiant about it, this insistence on order, on beauty, on gentleness in a century that has forgotten how to pause. The fire burns low. The lace curtains glow like bone china in the lamplight. You realize that everything, the brush, the silver spoon, the embroidered cushion, was once handled with such care because care itself was a form of resistance. Her maid is gone now, married to a railway clerk. The laughter of guests has faded into the silence of rented rooms and widows' letters. But when evening comes, she still draws the curtains and lights her lantern. The same little ritual, unchanged. She sits by the window, looks out at the electric lights flickering down the street, and murmurs to herself, "Too bright. Everything is too bright now." She preferred the honey glow of oil and flame, the kind that softened faces, that forgave, the kind that made the world look like a painting instead of a photograph. You can almost imagine her younger self in that reflection, the one who wrote secret poems, who dared to dream of walking alone through London, who hummed forbidden waltzes while her corset hung open. She is all of them at once now, the girl, the wife, the mother, the quiet chronicler of her own life. The notebook still exists. She keeps it hidden in the drawer by her chair. The ink has browned, the paper smells faintly of dust and roses. When she opens it, her words whisper back to her like an old friend. One line reads, "A woman must learn to glow even when the world forgets to notice." You stay with her a while through that last quiet hour before bed. She moves slowly, setting the room in order, folding her shawl, trimming the lamp's wick, placing the notebook carefully beneath the lace cloth. Every gesture feels ceremonial, a farewell performed nightly. The fire gutters. She stands before the mirror one last time, fingertips tracing the faint lines beside her mouth. Then softly she laughs, a sound almost like a sigh. "Not so different, really," she murmurs. "Still me under all this time." When she climbs the stairs, her candle throws long shadows across the wall. At the landing, she pauses, listening to the wind slip through the chimney. The city outside hums faintly with life. Cars, voices, the early murmurs of a new century that has forgotten to whisper. She turns away from it and closes her bedroom door. On the dresser, the photograph, the perfume bottle, the hairbrush with a few pale strands caught in its bristles, each an anchor to who she was or perhaps still is. The candlelight flickers, catches the edge of the mirror, and you see it again, that same lantern glow that has followed her through every evening. Fragile, steadfast, endlessly human. It's not a grand ending. There's no orchestra, no final declaration. Just the sound of the wind against lace and a woman breathing softly in her sleep. The Edwardian home is gone now. The streets are filled with engines and neon signs, the houses broken into flats, the parlors turned to offices. But if you listen late enough, you might still hear something. The clink of a teacup, the scratch of a pen, the faint echo of laughter behind drawn curtains. Because grace, once practiced long enough, doesn't die. It lingers in gestures, in memory, in the stubborn hum of women who refuse to let silence define them. Their lanterns burned quietly, but they burned all the same. And tonight, in this soft half-light, you've been sitting beside one. Now let your mind drift a little. The house grows dim, the fire sinks into a bed of soft orange embers. The clock ticks faintly, a heartbeat echoing through the hall. You can almost feel the air cooling, settling, the scent of lavender and wood polish folding gently around you. You've walked through parlors and kitchens, through years stitched in lace and candle smoke. You've heard laughter through closed doors and sighs meant for no one at all. The century turned and still the quiet remains. Every object in that home, the teacup, the silver frame, the worn notebook, was a small declaration of life lived carefully, lovingly, completely. And in those small gestures, you've seen something bigger than history. You've seen endurance, grace, and the courage to keep tending the light, even when the world rushes past. So take a slow breath. Imagine the flame of that last lantern flickering low, painting gold across the room, then softening into darkness. Feel how the quiet folds around you, not empty, but full of everything left unsaid. You're safe here, in this hush between centuries. The lady of the house closes her eyes. The world outside hums on, bright and restless, but within these walls time itself seems to pause, just long enough for both of you to rest. Good night, traveler of quiet rooms. Sleep well beneath the lace. Sweet dreams.